What is going on, guys? Welcome back. In this video today we're going to talk about Shebang, which is the Linux way of determining which interpreter should run a certain executable file. So let us get right into it. Alright, so chances are you've already encountered a shebang before, maybe in a Python script, maybe in a bash script, and you didn't really know what it was doing, what it was there for. A shebang is basically this top line that uses a hashtag and an exclamation mark followed by a file path and maybe an argument to specify which interpreter, which application should be used to run this specific file. So for example, I might have a main.py script, and you might see at the top of the script this hashtag exclamation mark and then something like user bin and then Python 3, for example. This is one example of how this could look. Or in a bash file, you might see user bin bash, for example. Now, the question is, why do we even need that line to specify which application should be used for this particular file if it's already having the Python file extension? So it's already called main.py. Why do I need to specify this shebang that specifies Python 3? And the thing is, you don't need to do that if you run this with Python 3. So if you go ahead and you run your script with Python 3 main.py, you don't need a shebang for this because you're specifying what application you want to use to run this particular script. However, in Linux, you can make files executable. You can give them the executable flag by saying change mode, so chmod and then +x and then main.py. In my case now main.py doesn't exist because I didn't save the file, but this would make this file an executable, which means that I can run it without specifying Python before it. I can run it by saying /main.py, and I can do that with any file. It can also have no file extension, so I can say run my file, provided that my file is an executable file, it has this X flag, I can run this as an executable. And I can do that with shell scripts, I can do that with Python files, it doesn't really matter. But the thing is, I need to specify this shebang because this shebang, if the file is not a binary file, specifies which application should be used to load this file. Now again, back to the question, why do I need this if I already named the file main.py? And the answer to that is Linux doesn't really care about file extensions. The idea that you determine a file's file type by looking at the file extension comes from Windows. So Windows does that. Windows looks at .py, .docx, .txt, and so on, and then specifies or handles the file as this specific file type. In Linux, we don't do that. In Linux, files are handled by shebangs, by certain signatures. For example, JPEGs are handled by the pattern. You can save a file as a .png. If the file itself has the JPEG structure, Linux is going to recognize it as a JPEG file, not as a PNG file, whereas Windows will tell you couldn't parse this PNG file because Windows cares about the file extension, Linux does not, which means that I can go ahead and I can create a Python script here, and I can say print hello world, for example. And of course, I can just go ahead now and run this. So I can say Python 3 main.py, and this works. But I can also go ahead now and say that actually, even though it's a py file, Linux doesn't care that it's a py file. I can specify a shebang that says /user/bin/bash. And this will use bash then. Now, of course, if I run this with Python 3, it should still work, as you can see. But if I now say, okay, my main.py file should be an executable file, so I'm going to give it the X flag. Now I can go ahead and run this file, and you will see it says syntax error. It doesn't know what this is because this is now treated as a bash file. Whereas if I go ahead and I change this to user bin and then Python 3, you will see that this works as a Python file. So I don't need to specify Python 3. It already uses Python 3 because of the shebang. And even more interesting, if I change this to bash and I change the code to echo hello world, so this is now bash code, then I get hello world because I'm running this as a bash script, even though it's a py file, because the file extension, again, doesn't matter on Linux. Linux cares about the content, Linux cares about the structure and about the shebang in case of scripts. So yeah, this is how you can specify this. So you can have a shell file, you can have a docx file. It doesn't matter what I call this file. I can call this file main.xlsx, which is now an Excel file. If I go into that file and I say that this is a Python script, and I print, even though Vim here doesn't recognize this as a Python script anymore, as you can see, there's no syntax highlighting. It doesn't matter because that is still a Python script for Linux because of the shebang. Now, of course, if I remove the shebang, it's not going to recognize this as a Python script anymore. By default, it's going to assume it's a shell script, so a bash script, and it's going to try to run it with bash. But you can see it doesn't matter what the file extension is. Now, that's basically what a shebang is for. Now, there's a caveat here because you can also specify an indirect path if you want to have, for example, a very long path, or if you have a very long path, or if you want to keep it dynamic, you don't want to specify a fixed path. What you do oftentimes with Python is you read it from the environment. So what you can do is, let's move this back here to a py file, main.py. Let's add a shebang here. Now, instead of saying user bin Python 3, which is the exact path to Python 3, what I can do, especially because on my system, Python might be here, but on other systems, it might be somewhere else. So maybe I don't want to do it just for my system. I want Python 3 to be used wherever it is at. Maybe it's not at user bin Python. So what I can do is I can go user bin and then environment, so env, and I can read Python 3 from the environment. So it's going to give me the path to Python 3 using this env command. And then I can go ahead again and say hello world. And then I can just say /main.py, and there you go. And I think actually we should even be able to just run this and see what this puts out. Okay, yeah, this basically takes from the environment the executable, as you can see. So it just runs this. Yeah, so this is what you can do. Maybe one thing that's interesting to know is that the limit for the shebang is 127 characters as far as I know. So if you have a very long path, you maybe want to use it from the environment. So you maybe want to specify the executable or the name here, and then you want to load it from the environment because you cannot fit more than 127 characters into the shebang. And yeah, that's basically what a shebang is for. It doesn't really make sense to use it on Windows. It's a Linux thing because Linux, again, doesn't care about the file extension. And I've seen this many times throughout my coding journey, and I always ask myself, okay, what do I need this for? I mean, it's already a Python script. I already run it with Python 3. Even on Linux, I can just run it with Python 3. Why do I need to specify this? Now you know if you've had the same question. You just have to specify this because if you run this as an executable, of course, if you always use Python 3, it doesn't matter. You can leave out the shebang because Python 3 already specifies or you already specify that you're going to use Python 3. But chances are you don't do that. You want to run this as an executable, and then it's important to specify the shebang because otherwise it's going to assume that this is a shell script. So that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it and hope you learned something. If so, let me know by hitting the like button and leaving a comment in the comment section down below. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell to not miss a single future video for free. Other than that, thank you much for watching. See you in the next video, and bye.